Baconators, mount up. What's up? It's Rob Cressy, founder and editor-in-chief of Bacon Sports. It is time for another edition of How to Make It in Sports Media. I'm super excited about today's show. On the line with me from GetSportsInfo.com, also host of SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and ESPN 1530 and Fox Sports 1360 in Cincinnati. The man who was the first person to ever give me my start in the world of fantasy sports, Dan Clasgens. How is it going, my friend?
Oh, if that isn't a throwback Thursday, I don't know what is, dude. But very well, very well. Of course, as I was talking before we started, it's been a rough week here in Cincinnati. Bengals lose to the Steelers. Dalton breaks his hand. Pete Rose keeps his band intact, and now Todd Frazier's a White Sox. He's heading to your direction, Mr. Cressy. It's been a rough day, a rough week here in Cincinnati.
I was going to ask you about Todd Frazier, but let's get right to it. So, from Cincinnati, I had no inkling that Todd Frazier was on the market.
Well, it became apparent a couple weeks ago at the Reds Fest, the big team fanfare thing that they do, and they do very well, by the way. It's a wonderful event, but you start hearing rumblings of people inside the organization talking about 2018. It's like, okay, start doing the math. It's a fire sale here for the Reds, and I'm not so sure it's going to, playing in the NL Central with your Bucks, the Cubbies looking good, the Cardinals stacked up. I mean, it's going to be a rough few years here, but the All-Star game was fun, so we got to enjoy Frazier for a minute.
And can you remember when the Reds had, back-to-back playoff appearances when you guys were the class of the town with the Cardinals when it was like Cueto and I don't know if Volquez was good that traded for Latos.
2012 was the year they should have won it. They were up 2-0 on the Giants, winning both games in San Francisco. Come back here, lose all three, then to what would be the world champion Giants on that run they had. And you look at the Royals this year. I mean, Volquez and Cueto, the two pitchers right there that were on the heart of that staff. Of course, it didn't work out quite as well. But it is what it is, dude. Luckily for me, I still like fantasy baseball because it's going to be a rough few years. Hopefully daily fantasy sports stays around for the next few baseball seasons. I'm gonna need it, dude.
Certainly, and we will dish about that. So, Dan, I like to start out my shows with having my guests give a hashtag random athlete of the day. It can be any athlete ever in the history of sports, whoever you want to throw out.
Well, dude, I mean, you got me all in the Reds' festive spirit. So that's got to be my favorite Red of all time, Eric Davis. Dude. I mean, Eric the Red. I still remember the headline. I got a picture over there on the wall that I won't bother to turn the camera to. Davis stuns Goliath when they swept the World Series. That home run Mr. Eric Davis hit in that game, it changed the whole series, dude. And I remember Hal Beaton, the USA Today baseball writer, columnist at that time, he wrote, "The Reds win the World Series. Yeah, I'll walk on water too." And I sent him a letter as a 15-year-old kid. Wrote him a letter to the editor saying, and addressed it, "Dear Jesus Christ," with the article from the USA Today clipped out of the Reds sweep. So Eric Davis, I mean, if that guy would have never been hurt, all the things I remember about him are the home runs that he would rob playing on that 140-degree July AstroTurf in Cincinnati at Riverfront Stadium before it was Synergy Field, dude, before they cut out a piece of it. But definitely Eric Davis.
My baseball card wallpaper to my left, I have several Eric Davis cards. One of a Dodgers Eric Davis.
Ooh. Is that with the stash? Did he have the stash with the Dodgers?
I don't remember. He looked all clean cut, and he looked like Willie Mays Hayes, man. You just see him like, this guy looks like a machine.
Not a little weird for Eric Davis at the end, He had the Baltimore stuff going on. I'll tell you what, though, he still looks pretty in shape, man. The dude still looks pretty slick and slim. So, and he is a part of the organization. That's what's good about the Reds, especially under the new ownership of Bob Castellini. They made a run at it. It's a small mid-market team here, so they're going to rebuild it. But they tapped into Davis and other members of the community around here, and it's really been a good community presence for the Reds here in recent years.
If he continues his current pace, Could Adam Jones be the next Eric Davis?
Tell you what, I've been a big Adam Jones fan since the beginning, and there were a few rough years there waiting, but we're really starting to see it come together. And I mean, he just fits that team and the Orioles. I mean, just it's good to see them back in the swing because when I was growing up as a kid, still one of my favorite unis. And Camden Yards, we're on the way to 30 teams. My wife and I, we're at 19. Camden definitely top 3 on my list, but I love Adam Jones, man. I think the sky's the limit for him, and he's in the right environment there.
Nice. And for me, my hashtag random athlete of the day, and I figured out to keep it Cincinnati, I'm going with Bo Diaz.
Oh man, why you got to go there, dude?
Because he used to play for the Buccos too.
Yeah, and the Phillies as well. I mean, Bo Diaz, number 6 there behind the plate. I mean, my grandpa Vito Sabino. He didn't like Bo Diaz. I used to listen to him with Marty and Joe on his summer reports there, and I don't, for whatever reason, he just didn't like Bo Diaz. So every time I think of Bo Diaz, first I think about the satellite, and then second I think of summertime on Grandpa's porch listening to Marty and Joe on the old transistor.
Nice. I always just liked his name because his name was Bo.
I mean, it's pretty cool to think about having a first and last name a total of 6 syllables or 6 letters, I should say. 6 letters. I mean, it's hard to get that. You would struggle to find a field of baseball team with 6 letters or less in their first and last name.
Maybe that'll be a challenge that I will throw out to
Are you taking the challenge? Let's give it to one of your Twitter followers. That sounds like a lot of work.
I like that. All right. Clearly, you and I can dish about virtually anything in the world of sports with no issues. But what I wanted to have you on is you've been a great inspiration for me in my career, moving it up from graduating college up to where I am now with Bacon Sports, doing stuff with Draft Pros. Little did I know that 12 years ago me would be doing backflips, knowing that right now I would be hosting a live streaming daily fantasy sports show, even though my path after I left GetSportsInfo was not fantasy sports. I've always loved fantasy sports. I'm in multiple leagues in every single sport, but for me, I went the more sports comedy angle, and lo and behold, in comes this opportunity for me to start working for Draft Pros doing fantasy sports again, and it's just like, it's my second calling again. And I started with you back in Cincinnati when I was probably 22 years old.
Are you that young? Dang, man. You're making me feel old now.
No, man. It's awesome because the longevity of which you've been able to continue to sustain, seeing your career grow has been a great inspiration to me. And I just wanted to dish a little bit about this with you to try and give inspiration to other people out there that if you've ever dreamed of working in sports, no matter how old you are, it can happen through grinding, hard work, love, passion, connecting with people, and having fun. So let's start back to the days of GetSportsInfo then, when me and Andy Bottoms and Jim Humbert and all those guys we're working, we're just doing, and this is when fantasy is small. That's like Sporting News was doing stuff. Salary cap stuff was big.
It's pretty crazy to think where it's all come. I mean, the industry as a whole. And I mean, first of all, thanks for the kind words. I mean, you've certainly carved out your own path, Rob. And a couple key things you hit on there were passion and persistence, man. And I don't care if it's your dream to work in sports or whatever it is in life, but you got to find something you're passionate about and you're persistent in obtaining. And that is the message I give to others. And, my biggest joy, honestly, and with Get Sports Enterprises, which is the bigger picture of what I started, my favorite thing, and I can say this wholeheartedly, is the fact of all the amazing people that have crossed our paths, people like you. And, for 13 years now, I mean, we have recently had a 10-year anniversary for our high school site, which has become the core of the business, tristatefootball.com. And with that, it's like, we had our 10-year anniversary, and I started counting them up, and I really pondered the interns and the reporters and the photographers and all the people that helped make us great. And in 10 years, I literally got to 143 people that I called and invited to that party, because that's how many different people like yourself came across. And that's been a great thing, is people have helped us get to where we want to go. We like to give back and sort of springboard them into it. And it is pretty cool to see people like yourself having success. I mean, some of our people now, with working for USA Today and, I mean, there's just been so many great success stories. And, yeah, that's probably been, one of the most fulfilling things in the whole vision.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's one of the things where I want to be so big in bacon sports, in building community and giving people opportunity. I worked for 14 years for free before making a cent doing sports content. And the
Yeah,
hard thing is, people
money,
often say,
money
well,
cannot
are
be
you
the
going
main
to?
motivator. Money cannot be the main motivator. That's a
No, it certainly can't. And people want to say, "Hey, can you pay me for this?" I'm like, "Sure. Show me where you've worked for ESPN before, and you have the credentials to be able to do all this." That jobs in sports media just don't grow on trees. You've got to carve this out yourself by building your audience, honing your craft, learning how to get good at writing. So, how did you handle in the beginning times when people you wanted to grow, but you didn't have the money to do so, and you wanted to bring more people on? Because I've felt the same thing, and there's probably a lot of other people who have created sports blogs that would like to grow, but obviously there's a problem. How do you pay people when it's still just a fledgling website?
Yeah. So, I mean, first, a few things. I mean, I started in 2003. So, I mean, there was no Twitter, there was no Skype, there was no blog. I mean, there was no podcast. I mean, we started when, I mean, the first ever site I launched was, and I'm not a graphic designer, was in Microsoft front page. And, it was funny for me because I was selling software to municipal government, and 9/11 hit, or 9/11 hit there, and uh, things just start in general. Government start watching their budgets, and that company was going in different directions. And when I left there, I just wanted to do my own thing, and obviously, I mean, from bartending to doing other things on the side. I mean, there's always been, other revenue streams, but, good support system. But I mean, today it's so easy, Rob. Yeah, there's a lot more people doing these things, but the tools are all right there. I mean, you are your own channel. I mean, you talk with the YouTube and the podcast and the ability and the power of social media and the connect and networking and all these different things that go on. It's like it is so much easier than what I had to do. Uh, even when you were writing for us, I mean, those were articles were sent in. We had to literally update web pages and multiple web pages. It wasn't even database driven, for crying out loud. But, I think the other thing you talk about is, how do you do it? I mean, you, everybody wants to write about blog. How you make money out of it is the other thing. And so you have to have a vision, man. You have to be able to sell yourself, and then you have to be able to sell all your ideas with it. And as you know, and as you've done pretty well, you start doing enough good things and working hard enough, and eventually people start taking notice, and that's when it really starts getting good, man.
Yeah, and do you remember the magazine pamphlet that was created that
Print,
went out? I don't even know if it was at
print.
bars or
That was their
restaurants.
print. Yeah. So, well, first of all, I started, looking at the journey and getting back to the timeline here. 2003, I decided to start a fantasy website. I was commissioning 5 fantasy leagues. I started playing fantasy in 1990. So this is my 25th season of fantasy football. And the late 90s, I was on Sportsline before it was even CBS Sports, using their commissioner services. And we found a software out there, a company that they're still in business today. They private label things, and we were able to have a model to where it was $100, $149 to do a league. I was paying 20 and charging whenever I wanted, serving support. So I went on, had an opportunity with Lance McAllister there on the old. I believe you may have joined me in that studio when we
Oh
had
yeah, certainly.
that studio was a closet. It was literally a closet. There weren't even chairs to sit down in. And Lance, I was a regular listener there on 1360, the Sports Animal, and he was talking one day right after I'd started. I decided to set up an LLC just because I was like, I don't know what this is going to do, but I'd rather protect myself. And I had no business plan. I mean, I still was trying to figure out how to do other things, build other websites. And so, long story short, got on with Lance, heard him talking about it, went in there for a test run. One segment into it, we had invited back for that season. And today I just wrapped up my 14th season of that same segment now with Mo Egger. But, so that was the foundation of, we went in there thinking we were going to have 10 leagues. After the first day on that channel, I had 67 people sign up for leagues. And for the next 2 years, I was like, okay, how can I repeat this success?
So let's talk about.
We joined the FSTA right then, I believe, as one of the first 100 members. Went to those shows. At that time, there were 6 million people playing fantasy sports. Now there's 57 million. Now there's thousands of members. I'm not as active as I used to be in the trade association, but at the end of the day, it was very, very raw. But fantasy's tough, Rob. And, as we'll talk about in a minute, I mean, if we would have just stayed in that, sense and some of the timing of things, it was very interesting, man.
Yeah, man, you got to hustle a lot. And I remember just seeing an article that I had written in print. And for me, it was like somebody gave me a gold bar. I was like, This is the pinnacle of my life. I got paid nothing, but my name and my knowledge is on this little pamphlet that's about this big. It was so good.
The ultimate crapper read. And, dude, I still got a couple boxes of them. Maybe I'll ship you one for I'll have to get your address. I'm sure I still got a Rob Cressy in print. We did try a lot of things, Rob, and that's where, hey, I did fantasy football. How could we do these other fantasy games? What I quickly learned, I was teaching myself to design websites. There was no social media or, none of these tools out there. So we found that my same target customers were in sports bars. So we started going to sports bars and selling them a website, maintenance, hosting, this promotions package with games. And in essence, I've created DFS with a different business model in 2005 because we were running daily fantasy games. The bars were our customers. They were paying for the games and offering them to their clients for free. And we were doing them on paper. So, So the Fantasy 5, which was a game that, I still pull out every now and then on paper. But, we at one point I had 36 bars paying us, lots of money for these games, for their website. Then the business took off with other word of mouth web business. And, we got lost there in web design to make things float. But in 2005 is where the advertising dollars really stopped. And we had an advertising driven business model, and fantasy was getting competitive. You had players fighting over the rights to their stats. You had the Unlawful Gaming Act that is, being talked about so much today. Those things. It was very nerve-wracking for me because ESPN, Yahoo all started offering free leagues. So the idea of using this third-party tool where they're going to be licensing things, and now the big 90% of these players are playing on 3 sites. I saw the writing on the wall that, we had started a little band and you had some subscribers, but at the end of the day, that's when we started transitioning into more of a sports media marketing company instead of just a fantasy sports website.
So did the Lance McAllister opportunity help open the doors to what you're currently doing now on Sundays, hosting the stuff on Fox Sports 1360? Like, tell me about that, the transition from GetSportsInfo doing a segment with Lance McAllister now to, hey, Sundays in Cincinnati, you want to know fantasy, you listen to Dan and James.
Yeah, and that's right. It all really did start with Lance in a lot of ways. Taking it back a notch. I mean, in those early years, I was on the 1360 show on Saturday morning, and I actually had to pay $400 for that 1 hour. $400 I paid to go on the air on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on a 5,000 watt station, and it dang near sank us. But it was a learning experience. So the fact today that, we actually get paid to do that, it just blows my mind where the journey had come. But I mean, in terms of what really started opening the doors, I mean, in 2005, as I alluded to, we saw the need for, and once again, before Twitter, before all these smartphones, I had, as you know, Rob, from your time here, high school football in Cincinnati is huge. I mean, the state of Ohio, a hotbed. And what I struggled to get local advertisers behind fantasy sports, but they were climbing at the door to get involved with with high school football. So we launched tristatefootball.com. And with that, we started supplying our content to TV and radio stations, sort of like an AP service feed, but it's just a, one customer type of thing. And those relationships, right now I work with Scripps Howard and It's exciting because they're buying up TV stations, and there's 24 of them. And, we've joined the VIPE High School Sports Network, and now we're a part of sites all over the country. We're in Texas and, Washington State and California. And there's a lot of opportunities there. And, just taking people out. We run about 25, 30 promotional events a year, award shows, produce 5,000 pieces of content. We had 4.5 million page views inside of 100-mile radius in about a 6-month span this football season. So, we've established the brand, and now taking that in other markets, I think is where the real opportunity. But the fantasy stuff never died because the local radio segment turned into others. I kept trucking and kept podcasting, and podcasting is a whole interesting story. You did some of the early podcasting with Get Sports Radio, didn't you? I can't remember.
Certainly. So I did that. I was also on the Saturday morning show as well. So
I knew you were on the Saturday morning show. I remember those very well. The podcast sort of get a little blurry.
Yeah. So for me, every little bit of this, as small as it may have seemed to you, for me was literally like you'd put me on Sports Center. I was like, I can't believe this. I'm going to be talking about fantasy football for 7 minutes on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. I will not go out on Friday night just so I can.
And now you have to be half lit to do it. That's funny.
Right. It was, but it's so for anyone out there who sees this as an inspiration, take these small things that have happened in my career because of what you are building, just getting into a free pamphlet magazine, just getting 7 minutes on a Saturday morning show that you paid $400 for, leads to where I am now and coming on your show last Sunday, and just all these different things. And these small milestones are what people need to hold on to and say, listen, I'm making progress. I see the end goal. It may not happen overnight, but man, I love doing this. And when you get to do that, as you're saying now, you get paid to talk fantasy sports.
Yeah. So, taking back a notch, so, in terms of, it's tough to figure out a revenue model. When you start doing your own site, but, I always treated it from day one, Rob, like there was 1,000 people watching. When I launched that very first post on GetSportsInfo on, June 10th of 2003, I treated it like, I may only had me and 2 of my friends looking at the site at that time, but I acted like there was thousands. And, that consistency, that approach was big. But, the other thing, I was blessed to have a lot of different people touch me through, and mentor me in some way or form and, you talk about Lance and, he's been great. But, early on when I was doing some TV stuff on the local NBC affiliate for fantasy football for free, I wasn't getting paid then, but it was a huge opportunity and a good growth thing. But working with Ken Brew and, back then the podcast stuff wasn't like it is today. It was a lot more of a challenge to produce a podcast, but iPods were becoming popular, that the concept was growing. I wanted to build a studio and do these things, and I was a little unsure. And Ken just said, you know how you start this, right? And you basically said, once you start doing it, you're doing it, was what he basically said to me. And, we started several podcasts. At one point, I think we had 12 different podcasts we were managing. And, those podcasts sitting in a little closet in this second floor office building of my buddy Jason's, doing fantasy football podcasting, where we had set up our video stuff 5 years. It was a podcast in there that was heard by the guy that hired me to go on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. So, the other pieces of the resume at the time had helped, but dude, it was just, I got a Saturday morning show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio because somebody heard my podcast. So you never know who's going to be listening. That's the moral of the story.
And for any of you who have or have not heard of Gary Vaynerchuk, a huge social media guy who's big into creating content, he has a thing called the power of one. So when you're just starting out, even if you only get 12 views on your YouTube video or 17, 57, you don't know who that one person is. And guess what? 1 is always greater than 0. And as you showed there, you may not have had the biggest audience, but guess what? The right person saw it, saw the talent, and then the culmination of everything that you did worked for you. So right now with me at Bacon Sports, I don't care how many people see any of my videos. I'm just creating the videos for the love of it. And it's going to grow over time as I continue to build that persistence and keep doing that thing. But just know, you never know who any of those people are, and that's what should help drive you.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty crazy. And I mean, you look at it, I mean, 30, 40 years ago, there was basically 3 or 4 channels on a TV. And now in the world we live in, I mean, people aren't even buying TVs. The way you can just create your own thing. I think, too, I mean, it's a challenge. You have to think of your limitations. I mean, don't go quitting your job to start up all this stuff. I mean, really, even today, I mean, there have been large spurts where my own, I've never just had one thing. I mean, rest assured, I've had 40 hours a week of commitment to Get Sports for a decade. Actually, recently I've sort of backed off a little bit. I have partners in the company. I mean, I'm still have an everyday role, but I've taken on some nonprofit work as a fundraising strategist and using some of these skills now with a mission behind them. So, I have gone to another chapter, but I take pride in the fact that I host 3 radio shows a week, 6 months a year, and I get paid to talk about football. So that's a good thing. I mean, so yeah, I'm not on ESPN, and I worked hard, and I'm not settling. I mean, these are choices I make based off of what makes me happy, and that's the begin. That's dude. It goes back to passion and persistence. You got to really want it, and you got to really work for it because it's not easy. Success, my most common thing I tell people that I would come across that are part of our team is like, hey man, success just doesn't happen. You have to plan for success. So if the other words of wisdom for aspiring people, if it don't make money, it doesn't make sense. Don't keep, I mean, content's great and all your podcast, but at the end of the day, you can't spend 90% of your time creating all this amazing content. You've got to get exposure. How you make money is difficult. I really, really believe that, Rob, some of the things that you've done early on have been awesome because you've grasped what I told you a few years back when you were pondering your big leap, and that is promotions, man. I mean, you can create this online brand, but grassroots marketing, shaking people's hands, getting out there and slapping your T-shirt on them, and doing these things. I mean, that's what. How do you get one to get one is what I talk about in fundraising with the disabled American veterans at the AV. Is everybody's looking for the next ice bucket challenge and how we're going to get this huge
Yep.
thing, and I'm more focused on how do I get one of our donors to get another donor and get that donor to get another donor. And it's the same thing I did with Get Sports. It's like, this guy loves my site. He comes here for his information. In fantasy, it's a little tough because you find a good source for information is you don't want to necessarily share it with
Right.
buddies. So it works a little better with my high school thing. But rest assured, man, if one of my favorite movies of all time, Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, one thing that I've been huge into is the guerrilla marketing. At all times, I have at least 15 business cards on me because I actually have found writers being on the train in Chicago where I'm heading up to the Buccos versus Cubs game. It just so happens I see a mom, a young boy who's like 4, and a girl in her 20s. And naturally, we start talking, and being from Pittsburgh, of course, they're sports junkies. Boom, I give her a card. She's like, oh, I did some writing at Northwestern. She's one of the best writers I have on Bacon Sports. Shout out to Rebecca Ramos. You
Dude,
really never know. And the more, oh, you're wearing a Kentucky hat, boom. Hey, what's up? What do you think about this team this year? Or Carl Anthony Towns, he's crushing it up in Minnesota. Hey, check out my site, boom. Little 1 minute interaction where all of a sudden someone's like, man, I don't know what that was, but that 1 minute is way better than any banner advertising you'll ever see.
yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the way advertisers are getting to the consumer is changing as well. And I mean, being creative and doing some things there. I mean, we're fortunate because we've always believed with an on-air, on-site, online, right? And with the way a lot of our podcasts have worked, and especially with our local radio, I mean, part of our deals that we work out there, I'm not an employee at that radio station. I mean, we're contracting them to produce content, and in turn, we get inventory. and it's a brokerage is the tech, the industry term we're talking here. And that's a great thing for us because we take that inventory, we create this online social media type of inventory, and then we tie it into some on-site events. And we're able to build a lot of success and continuity. Now, once again, I mean, sort of stepping out of the fantasy sports stuff where it's a much more competitive space and looking at my niche of, hey man, in this 3-hour circle that I live in here in Cincinnati, you have Indianapolis, Columbus, Louisville, Lexington. There's 10 million people, and high school football is huge. So, I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity for here with us to, I'm working with the U.S. Marines and Metro PCS and, these regional partners that are helping us grow this vision. And I mean, so all that started because I couldn't find the score of my nephew's high school football game if I didn't go to the game back in 2005. Now, of course, Twitter at TS Football is a very engaged audience. I mean, we only have about 8,000 followers right now, but they're very regionalized and engaged. And on a Friday night, man, I mean, that's where they turn to for their update. And, that's pretty cool, man. That show we do on Friday night, when I sit in the studio, I miss a lot of football. But when the game ends, I got 10 to 15 players and coaches I'm talking to live off the field, man. And it's nothing more fun than interviewing a 16, 17-year-old kid after he just had the best night of his life. And I get to do that, 12 Friday nights a year. So it's a pretty special time there.
That's awesome. So let's briefly talk about the fantasy sports industry and DFS specifically. So there's this stuff going down in New York. There's just legislation, and I think both of us certainly hope that DFS is here to stay. I certainly believe it is. I'm not worried in the least bit about this, but just want to get your thoughts on the industry as a whole, because really we've seen two completely different models. Season long, which is a lot more friend based, where there's much less commitment. It's more traditional. And then now you've got DFS, which is a lot harder to make money. They throw the lottery ticket in front of you, and you have to have a lot more knowledge for it. Plus, the industry people haven't really made the jump, despite the fact that it's been a gigantic growth curve. You just look at regular fantasy football compared to DFS. They haven't even touched the surface on it yet. What are your thoughts about all of that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'll go back to something I said 5 minutes ago. It blows my mind because I was this close to being on the cusp of that stuff with these daily games. I actually pitched the Cincinnati Reds in 2005 fantasy baseball as part of my deal at that time with Cincinnati Bell Wireless, where we would text like players. And I mean, it was brainstormed. It was. And to go there now and see DraftKings signs all over the ballpark, it's like, gosh, I mean, if only. But in terms of, I mean, first of all, there's no doubt, Rob. I mean, we know it's a game of skill. I mean, nobody's doubting that. I'm not a seasoned pro at DFS. I've been playing fantasy season long, like I said, actually fantasy football for 25 years, fantasy baseball for 27, and I'm only 40. So, I started off pretty early and crunching a lot of stuff by hand. I definitely think that, like, from my enjoyment perspective, beyond the money and the rush and the live scoring, is still in the season long grind of things. But that said, I go back to 5 years ago when I first started at SiriusXM and with my co-host Drew Dinkmeyer, who is one of the people you see plastered all over the DraftKings commercial when he won the Millionaire Maker in Week 15 last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Drew, Drew made the front page of the Wall Street Journal when he quit his job as a financial analyst to play daily for a living. And he's one of the masterminds of the game. But I'm just going back to like when I first met Drew and he was telling me, and like I had never even really played the daily. I had seen it, I knew of it, and he was. I mean, some of the stuff he was saying to me then, and seeing where it's all progressed now, it just blows my mind. But I'm all for it. I find personally that I'll set little football lineups. I like single entries. I don't want to invest a large bankroll in it. I mean, baseball I like baseball and daily the best. I mean, I like the fact I can play a day slate, a night slate, and the daily grind of it, and you get on a little run, you do your things. Football, I mean, I do it. I certainly, I'm I need to follow it. So, I mean, I've had some success. I've had some rough patches, but it is a lot of fun. And all the stuff that's going on right now, I think in the end will be good. I think, the states are going to get paid, man. I mean,
Right.
government's going to get paid. And I think once they figure all that out and do some more regulation, I like to see, more single entry opportunities in there, because that's when it really becomes a game of skill. You want to really make it a game of skill. I believe, you take away the idea of, a guy having 50 entries up against a guy that only wants to have a couple in there. And if that means, less prize pools or what have you, all the multi-entry stuff, I think that is probably one of the things that you will see change in some regard. But I don't know. I don't think it's going anywhere. There's too many stakeholders getting some serious money off of it. So,
Right. As the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase said, everybody's got a price.
yes, and the money's there, man. I mean, look at your 20% increase in fantasy sports players last year. I mean, 57 million people are playing. 1 out of 5 of them are only DFS players. So I'm all for it. I'm all for anything that brings a bunch of new people to the industry. I'm not. I live in a market where there isn't NBA. I'm a huge college basketball fan. I love the NBA. Don't really have a team. I don't follow it intently. I'm certainly not ready to jump into and play DFS there, mainly because I need a little bit of a break, to be honest with you. But I think it's a lot of fun, man. I'm looking forward to. Last year was my first baseball season where I literally, was playing more days than I wasn't, and I had some success. So I'm looking to get back to some baseball and enjoy those day-night game slates.
Man, I love fantasy baseball. So a lot of people say, "Oh my God, it's just too all-encompassing." And how am I gonna know all the players and spending so much time on your lineups? And I was like, "Yeah, that's the good part." Like, if you love fantasy, like for me, I started playing fantasy baseball because the Pirates were bad for 21 straight years.
Yeah.
So, like you're saying with the Reds,
See?
it's like I love baseball, but if my team sucks, what do I do? So
Yeah.
now I used fantasy
I started playing
baseball.
fantasy football in the '90s in Cincinnati. I mean, it saved me. It saved me, man.
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm with you on all of that, especially the single entry. All right, Dan. So I'm going to do some rapid fire questions for you. I have a feeling you and I could literally talk for 10 hours about anything, but I'm going to be respectful of your time and get you out on some of these. So you can only choose one: bacon, sports, or beer.
Oh man, it's. I mean, I love bacon sports, Rob, but I love my beer too much,
So you're going with beer?
man. Yeah, I would have to choose beer over you, dude. I hope you choose beer over me as well.
Well, no, bacon, comma, sports, comma, or beer. You can
Oh,
only choose one of them.
now we're talking something different. Oh, dude, it would definitely be sports. Sports.
All right, so if you had to be buried in one sports jersey, which one is it?
Pete Rose. I mean, I'll go. I'll. He'll die not in the Hall of Fame, and he's my guy. So,
All right, who is the greatest NFL running back ever?
ooh, I still think it's Barry Sanders, but I wish I could have saw a couple more years of it.
I am completely with you on that one. What is the most memorable game you've ever been to live?
Wow, that's a tough question because I've seen some great ones, but it would have to be Game 6, Rob. And I hate to bring it up, but that NLCS 1990, we beat the Pirates, Riverfront Stadium, to go to the World Series. To this day, it's still like one I'll never forget, man.
Man, those early '90s Buccos are just heart wrenching for me because my family had World Series tickets every single year, and every single year the Pirates found a way to not win.
Oh man, there were some good teams. That was a great series. I did enjoy being there.
All right, one song plays every time you walk into a room. What is it?
Oh man, every time I walk into the
You
room,
can
well,
go any way you want. It can be
it
your
would have
favorite
to be,
song.
first of all, it had to be Allman Brothers. I mean, that's how I met my wife. We named our daughter Jessica after the band. I've seen them over 30 times in 15 different states. So, and that song is the Blue Sky, man. That's like a second religion to me. So you can roll
All
that out.
right. You get to play. You get to play a round of golf with any three athletes ever that are living. Who's joining you in your foursome?
Well, I'd have to get some really old dudes, so I wouldn't have they wouldn't realize how weak my drive is. So I'd probably go with all baseball guys too, but I definitely want Willie Mays out there. I actually had a chance to talk to him a couple times at shows and different things. What a great dude. I mean, Willie Mays. How much longer are we gonna have him? Definitely Pete Rose, because he's the guy. And then we'd have to have a hot chick out there, Anna Kournikova. How about that?
Yeah. Like where your head is at. All right, get you out on this last one. What is your outlook for the Bengals now that Andy Dalton is out?
Well, I mean, clearly it's an uphill battle, and it is a little disappointing because I do believe that Dalton's taken a bum rap for the team's failures in the playoffs. I mean, certainly has some of the blame, but I don't know. I think the schedule favors him, Rob. That's going to be a big factor here. I mean, the 49ers and Baltimore, I think with that defense, those running backs, that offensive line, these are games they need to go win. If they can win 2 or 3, maybe the Broncos get beat by your Steelers this week. Something else happens to them. The Bengals could end up at that 2 seed. I think Dalton could maybe be back in 4 weeks. The buzz around here is that he could. But we'll see, man. I'm optimistic, but not as optimistic because I really do believe they were a Super Bowl, as are your Steelers. You know what I'm afraid of now as a Bengal fan is the Carson Palmer versus Ben Roethlisberger Super Bowl that I keep having nightmares about because I might puke if that happens.
Oh, brutal. All right, Dan, time to drop some plugs. Anything you want, let us know what's cooking. Get Sports Info, Tri-State, all that stuff.
Yeah, man, definitely. First of all, you can check out me anytime on Twitter at Dan Clasgens. I'm on LinkedIn a lot too. If you want to do some more business type stuff, Get Sports Info for the fantasy football, all the rankings. We do other stuff besides fantasy football, but and then of course SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. You can get us there Saturday mornings. I'll be on through January, or up until late January. And then the local show, we got a couple more weeks there. Sunday mornings, iHeartRadio. You can listen on Fox Sports 1360. Rob, definitely appreciate the time, man. Merry Christmas to you and yours, and best of luck in the stretch. And aside from the Steelers thing, man, I'm all on your side.
Thanks, man. It's been a blessing to have known you. I'm very happy to have had you be the start of my sports journey. Like I said, you're a great inspiration to me. Hopefully this conversation can be a great inspiration to others out there who dream of working in sports, because it can certainly happen. Just keep doing it and keep loving it, and good things will happen.
Yeah, you keep up the good work too, man. I do love the stuff you're doing. Doing a great job, and it's definitely the sky's the limit there, buddy. So your sports comedy is fresh, as James Adams, my co-host, would say.
Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it. Have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you as well.
All right, man.
Boom shakalaka.